But what about the children? In the preceding sections, we've tried to explain what a regulated system for the distribution, sale, and use of cannabis by adults would look like. Yet we know that some of you reading this book may remain concerned about the potential impact that such a system might have upon young people's attitudes toward marijuana. For instance, might teens perceive cannabis differently than they do now if its use and sale were legal for adults? And could such a taxed and regulated market, even with appropriate safeguards in place, inadvertently provide teens with greater access to marijuana than they have now? As two of the three authors of this book are parents, we understand these concerns and wish to address them. As mentioned previously, implementing legal yet restricted access to cannabis is not necessarily associated with increased marijuana consumption among young people. To repeat, marijuana use by young people fell in California following the enactment of laws allowing for the sale of cannabis to qualified adults. Let us explain why we believe this is the case. 1. Even under our current system of criminal marijuana prohibition, almost 90% of teenagers report on government surveys that marijuana is easy to get. In fact, many high school surveys indicate that teens can more readily purchase illicit cannabis than buy alcohol or tobacco, both of which are legally available to adults but cannot be sold to children. One study by the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse even reported that 23% of teens said that they could buy pot in an hour or less. That means nearly a quarter of all teens can already get marijuana about as easily and as quickly as a Domino's pizza. In truth, no system we can think of could possibly provide our children with greater access to cannabis than the system we already have in place, prohibition. That said, we are not going to deny that some young people will still gain access to marijuana under a regulated system, just as some young people today have access to alcohol. Of course, those who do will be obtaining a regulated product of known quality that is sold from a state-licensed retail outlet. This scenario, while hardly ideal, is still far better than the situation that exists today, where millions of children are purchasing an unregulated product of unknown quality from millions of unlicensed sellers who have a financial incentive to encourage their customers to use other illegal substances like cocaine or methamphetamine. And don't forget, under our current system of prohibition, teens don't even need to possess a fake ID to buy pot. Truth be told, however, we do not assume that most teens, or even a strong majority of young people, will suddenly crave marijuana if it were legally available for adults. Virtually every teenager can already get his or her hands on cannabis now if he or she chooses. Yet it is apparent that most young people who quit using marijuana, or that never use it in the first place, abstain from it despite possessing the means to readily obtain it. For example, in 2008, investigators at the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research reported the reason for not using or stopping marijuana use, cited by the fewest seniors over the 29 years of data, was availability, less than 10% of seniors. The authors further discovered that the artificially high price of cannabis on the black market, as well as young people's concern about getting arrested, seldom influenced their choice whether or not to use marijuana. By contrast, researchers reported that young people's concern for psychological and physical damage, as well as not wanting to get high, were the most commonly cited reasons for quitting or abstaining from marijuana use. In other words, it's not the illegality of cannabis that dissuades teens from using it. Rather, it's adolescents' personal like or dislike for the intoxicating effects of cannabis, as well as their perceptions regarding its health effects, that ultimately shape their decision to smoke marijuana. But isn't it possible that legalizing a substance that is currently prohibited might change the way some teenagers think about marijuana? Yes, it's possible, but not likely. Tobacco is legal, even for some teenagers, yet cigarette use has fallen among young people to all-time lows, because adolescents have become more and more aware of its health hazard. Moreover, the only federal government study ever to evaluate the attitudes and use patterns of young people in marijuana in states that liberalized its possession determined, overall, the preponderance of the evidence which we have gathered and examined points to the conclusion that decriminalization has had virtually no effect either on the marijuana use or on related attitudes and beliefs about marijuana use among American young people.